Family cabin was a ruin, so I spent years fixing it. Now my brother calls me greedy because he wants free vacations while his wife brags about their Maldives trip, and my uncle threatens to burn it down. A few years ago, my grandparents passed away. They left us this old cabin by the lake. It was beautiful but falling apart, rotten wood, leaky roof, ancient plumbing. The place had been in our family forever, but when it came time for someone to take it over, no one really wanted it. First, my parents offered it to my younger brother, Matt. He used to talk all the time about how much he loved that cabin growing up. But when he saw what shape it was in, he backed out fast. Too much work, he said. I can't afford renovations or upkeep. So my parents asked me next. I thought about it for a while. I knew fixing it up would be hard and expensive. But that cabin meant so much to me. I spent almost every summer there as a kid, fishing with Grandpa, roasting marshmallows with my cousins. It felt like home. So I decided to take it on. Let me tell you, taking ownership wasn't just signing some papers. It was years of blood, sweat, and money. I replaced the roof, fixed the foundation, redid the plumbing, and rebuilt the deck, which was practically falling apart. Every spare dollar I had went into making that place livable again. I even asked my family for help, money or labor, but nobody stepped up. Fast forward a few years. Guess who calls? Matt. He says he and his wife want to bring their kids for a week-long vacation at the cabin. No problem, I say, but they'll need to pay $500 to cover utilities and general wear and tear. That's when things got ugly. Matt flipped out. He called me greedy for charging family. He said, the grandparents wouldn't want the cabin to be a business. Really? I reminded him that he had the chance to own the cabin first, but he turned it down because it was too much trouble. Now that I've put in all the work and money to make it nice, it's not fair for him to expect free vacations just because we're related. He argued, it's not like you're paying rent on it anyway. You were going to be there regardless. That's not the point. If I let him stay for free, where do I draw the line? Do I have to invite every cousin, uncle, or distant relative who wants a weekend getaway? If Matt gets free access without contributing anything, doesn't that mean I'm basically funding his vacation? Our mom got involved. She said I should do the right thing because family helps family. I told her Matt had the first shot at the cabin, but he refused because it was too much work. When I asked for help later, he didn't lift a finger. He didn't want the responsibilities, but now he wants the benefits. Matt hasn't spoken to me since. Mom keeps saying I'm being unfair. Am I the jerk for expecting him to chip in? Or is he just acting entitled? It's been 6 months since Matt last talked to me, but the drama isn't over. Mom keeps trying to mediate, saying I'm being too hard on him. She says, he's your brother, he'll come around. But honestly, I don't think this is about coming around anymore. This is about boundaries and respect. The cabin's renovations are finally complete. It looks amazing now. Brand new deck, solid foundation, updated kitchen, everything you'd want in a summer getaway. People from all over the family have started asking if they can visit. Some offer to pay, others expect it to be free because, well, it's family property. Every time someone mentions the cabin, I feel like I'm back at square one with Matt's entitlement issue. But here's where things get interesting. Matt recently posted pictures of his latest vacation online. He went somewhere exotic, Maldives, I think, and bragged about how great it was. Meanwhile, he's still mad at me for charging $500 for a week at the cabin, which costs way more than that to maintain. Seeing those photos made me realize something important. Maybe he doesn't actually care about the cabin. Maybe it's not even about money. Maybe it's just pride. He didn't want to admit he needed help or acknowledge my effort. And then there's Dad. He hasn't said much until recently. Last weekend, he pulled me aside and told me something surprising. Turns out, when Grandpa left the cabin to him years ago, Dad faced similar issues with his siblings. They wanted access but refused to contribute financially or physically. Eventually, Dad bought them out so he could manage the place himself. That's why the cabin ended up being passed down only to us kids instead of the whole family. Hearing this gave me some perspective. Maybe what I'm doing isn't as selfish as Mom thinks. Maybe it's just practical. Now, here's the twist. Aunt Sarah, the sister I barely ever see, reached out unexpectedly. She heard through the grapevine about the cabin situation and offered to rent it for her daughter's birthday party next month. She asked if she could bring a group of 10 people and pay double the usual rate. Normally, I'd hesitate, but after everything with Matt, I figured why not? If other family members are willing to treat the cabin like a business, then fine. Let's run it like one. Meanwhile, word got back to Mom somehow, and she flipped. She accused me of ruining the family legacy by turning the cabin into a profit-making machine. I tried explaining that maintaining the place requires real money and effort, but she wouldn't listen. Now she's siding with Matt again, calling me cold-hearted and greedy. Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can keep dealing with this guilt trip. Oh, and guess who showed up uninvited last weekend? Uncle Joe, claiming he has a right to stay because it's family land. He brought along his dog, which promptly chewed up one of the new deck chairs. When I confronted him about it, he laughed it off and said, "Relax, kid. You're overreacting." Overreacting? Really? So now, I'm stuck between keeping the peace with family and protecting my investment. The cabin means a lot to me, but it also represents years of sacrifice. Every dollar I've poured into it came out of my own pocket, and every decision I've made has been based on fairness. Yet, no matter how many times I explain this, some people refuse to understand. What do? Do I cave in and let everyone use the cabin for free just to avoid conflict? Or do I stick to my guns and risk alienating more family members? And most importantly, how do I handle mom's constant interference without losing my mind? So, it's been a couple weeks since the whole Uncle Joe incident, and honestly, things haven't gotten any simpler. If anything, they've gotten weirder. Let me break it down. First off, Aunt Sarah came through with her daughter's birthday party at the cabin. She showed up with 9 other people, which was fine because she paid double like we agreed. The group had a blast. BBQs, swimming, s'mores by the fire pit. It was nice to see the place being enjoyed again after all the drama. Plus, the extra cash helped cover some maintenance costs I'd been putting off. But here's the kicker. One of Aunt Sarah's cousins started asking if he could book the cabin for his bachelor party next spring. He seemed serious about it too, offering a deposit right there on the spot. Part of me thought, why not? It's income, and it keeps the place running. But another part worried. If word spreads that the cabin's available for rent, how long before every random cousin thinks they're entitled to a discount or worse, free access? Then Mom called again. Yeah, you guessed it. She wasn't happy about the bachelor party talk. Her exact words were, "This isn't Airbnb, Tim." I didn't argue this time. Instead, I told her flat out, "Mom, the only reason the cabin exists today is because I fixed it." No one else stepped up. Not Matt, not anyone. So yeah, maybe it feels weird treating it like a business, but it's either this or let it fall apart again. She didn't have much to say after that, which was refreshing for once. But wait, there's more. A few days later, Matt's wife reached out. Not Matt himself, but his wife. She sent me a message saying they still want to use the cabin sometime this summer, but they'd be willing to pay the full $500 fee this time. Full price, no complaints. At first, I almost said yes just to avoid further conflict. Then I remembered everything. The flip out over charging, the refusal to help when I asked, the months of silence. Something inside me snapped. I replied politely but firmly, "Thanks for reaching out, but the cabin's booked solid for the rest of the summer. Maybe next year." Now, here's where it gets complicated. 2 days ago, Dad dropped another bombshell. Remember how he mentioned buying out his siblings years ago? Well, turns out, there's an old agreement somewhere in the attic. A legal document from back then stating that the cabin officially belongs to our branch of the family now. Not shared among all cousins, not open season for whoever shows up. Just us. Dad found it while cleaning out some boxes and thought I should know. Honestly, I didn't even realize such a thing existed. It changes everything. With this new info, I started thinking harder about setting actual rules for the cabin. Like, who gets priority? How often can family members stay without paying? What happens if someone damages something? And most importantly, how do I communicate these rules without sounding like a jerk? So, I drafted up a simple policy. Family members get first dibs on reservations. Non-family renters are allowed if space permits, but they pay market rate. Anyone staying must agree to basic upkeep, cleaning supplies provided, no pets unless approved, etc. Damage means deductibles. I sent the draft to Mom, figuring she'd blow up. Surprisingly, she didn't. She actually gave me some feedback, suggesting we add a section about holidays being reserved exclusively for immediate family. That made sense, so I added it. Now, I just need to figure out how to share this with everyone else without starting World War III. Meanwhile, Aunt Sarah's cousin followed up about the bachelor party. He wants to confirm dates and send a deposit. Part of me says go for it, it's good money, and it will keep the place busy. Another part wonders if opening the floodgates will make the cabin feel less personal, less special. After all, it's not just a building, it's a piece of my childhood, my memories, my hard work. And then there's Matt. Or rather, the lack of him. Since his wife's message, he hasn't tried contacting me directly. Which is fine, honestly. If he wanted a real conversation, he'd reach out instead of sending her to do his dirty work. But the longer he stays silent, the more it feels like he's waiting for me to crack, to cave in, to invite him back without conditions. And that's not happening. Oh, and Uncle Joe? Yeah, he showed up again last weekend, this time claiming he needed a quiet place to reflect. Reflect on what? I don't know. All he did was drink beer, play loud music, and leave trash everywhere. When I confronted him about cleaning up, he got defensive. "Don't act high and mighty, kid," he said. "This lands in your bloodline. You owe us access." Owes us? Really? Newsflash, Uncle Joe, I owe exactly 0 to people who refuse to contribute. Now, here's the latest twist. Grandpa's old neighbor stopped by unexpectedly. His name's Hank, and he used to hang out with Grandpa during fishing trips. Turns out, Hank knows a lot about the history of the property. Stuff even Dad didn't mention. For example, did you know the original cabin burned down decades ago, and Grandpa rebuilt it almost entirely by hand? That guy worked miracles with whatever tools he had. Hearing stories like that reminded me why the cabin matters so much, not just as a vacation spot, but as a symbol of effort, resilience, and love. Hank also warned me about something important. He said families like ours always face tension over properties like this. Some see it as a treasure, others as a burden. The key, according to him, is deciding early who gets to decide. You're doing the right thing, he told me. Set boundaries. Make rules. Stick to them. Otherwise, it'll eat you alive. His advice stuck with me. It reinforced what I already suspected, that fairness doesn't mean bending over backward for everyone. Fairness means creating a system that works for both the cabin and its caretaker. In this case, that's me. So, moving forward, I've decided to stick to my guns. The rules go up on the fridge, shared via email, posted online if necessary. If family members respect them, great. If not, well, they're welcome to find their own summer homes. As for Matt, honestly, I don't care anymore. He had his chance. He chose not to take responsibility. Now he's mad because I did. Tough luck. The biggest challenge now is balancing practicality with sentimentality. On one hand, the cabin needs to generate enough income to sustain itself. On the other, it needs to remain a place where memories can be made, traditions carried forward. Finding that middle ground won't be easy, but it's worth trying. And hey, if anyone gives me grief about it, I'll just remind them of two things. First, the cabin exists today because I saved it. Second, Grandpa would expect nothing less than someone standing up for what's theirs. That's where I stand right now. Still working out the kinks, still dealing with family drama, but also feeling better about the choices I've made. Guess we'll see how it plays out. It's been almost a year since I last posted about the cabin, and wow, what a ride it's been. Things have settled down a bit, but not without some major twists along the way. Let me fill you in. First off, the rules I drafted? They worked. Surprisingly well, actually. Once I posted them online and sent them out to the family email chain, most people seemed okay with them, or at least didn't argue openly. Aunt Sarah even praised me for being organized, which was unexpected. She booked another weekend for her daughter's graduation celebration, and this time, she brought fewer people and kept everything spotless. It felt good to see someone appreciate the effort I've put into maintaining the place. But Matt? Yeah, he finally reached out, not through his wife this time, but directly. His message was short. Hey, can we talk? I hesitated before responding. After all, he hadn't exactly been communicative up until now. But curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed to meet him halfway at a coffee shop. Turns out, he wanted to apologize, for real this time. He admitted that he'd been wrong about how he handled things last year. I was an ass, were his exact words. You stepped up when no one else would, and I acted like it didn't matter. He also mentioned that seeing pictures of the renovated cabin made him realize how much work went into fixing it. It looks amazing, Tim, he said. You did a great job. For a moment, I thought maybe we could move past everything. But then he dropped the bombshell. He wanted to buy me out. Not rent, not share, but fully own the cabin. His reasoning? He and his wife are planning to settle down soon, and they'd love to turn the place into their own summer home. He offered a decent price too, more than enough to cover my investments and leave me with a profit. At first, I considered saying yes. It would mean less stress, fewer arguments, and no more worrying about upkeep costs. But as I sat there listening to him, something clicked. This wasn't just about money or convenience anymore. The cabin meant too much to me personally. It wasn't just a building, it was years of memories, sweat, and sacrifice wrapped up in one place. So, I told him no. Politely, but firmly. Matt, I said, this isn't about business. It's about family. And right now, this is mine. He looked surprised, maybe even hurt, but he respected my decision. We left the coffee shop on okay terms, though I don't know if things will ever go back to normal between us. Honestly, I'm fine with that. Some relationships need space to heal, and others might never recover. Either way, I feel good knowing I stood my ground. Now, here's where things get interesting. Remember Dad mentioning that old agreement from years ago? Turns out, it wasn't just a piece of paper, it was legally binding. With help from a lawyer friend, I had the document reviewed and updated to reflect current ownership rights. Now, the cabin officially belongs to me, with clear guidelines on who can use it and under what conditions. No more gray areas, no more confusion. This legal clarity gave me confidence to take the next step, opening the cabin to outside renters. Not full-time, mind you, but during off-peak seasons when family members aren't using it. I listed it on a local rental platform, keeping prices reasonable but fair. Within weeks, I had bookings lined up for fall and winter weekends. A couple of families came through, enjoyed themselves, and even left positive reviews. One group even tipped me for providing extra blankets. They hadn't expected such attention to detail. Small gestures like that made me realize running the cabin like a small business doesn't have to feel cold or impersonal. In fact, it can make it more sustainable in the long run. Of course, Mom wasn't thrilled about the rentals at first. Tim, are you sure about this? She asked. What if strangers ruin the place? Fair question, but I explained my plan, screen potential guests carefully, set expectations up front, and inspect the property after each visit. Plus, I installed security cameras around the perimeter, not to spy, but to deter vandalism. She eventually warmed up to the idea once she saw how smoothly everything ran. Uncle Joe, on the other hand, lost his cool completely. When he found out about the rentals, he called me demanding free access again. This is family land, he yelled. You can't sell spots to outsiders while locking us out. I stayed calm and reminded him of the rules, and the agreement Dad had signed decades ago. That shut him up pretty quickly. Haven't heard from him since, and frankly, I'm okay with that. The biggest surprise came from Hank, Grandpa's old neighbor. He stopped by again recently, bringing photos and stories from the early days of the cabin. Apparently, Grandpa used to host community gatherings there every summer. Barbecues, bonfires, even talent shows. People from all over town would come, not just family. Hearing this changed my perspective. Maybe opening the cabin to outsiders isn't so bad after all. Maybe it honors Grandpa's legacy in its own way. Inspired by Hank's stories, I decided to host a special event this summer, a cabin open house for anyone who's ever spent time there. Family, friends, neighbors, you name it. I cleaned the place top to bottom, stocked the fridge with snacks, and set up games by the lake. Dozens of people showed up, including some I hadn't seen in years. We shared meals, swapped tales, and laughed until our sides hurt. For the first time in a long time, the cabin felt alive, not just as a vacation spot, but as a gathering place for memories. Looking back, I realize how far I've come since inheriting this mess of a project. What started as a burden turned into something meaningful, a symbol of resilience, hard work, and personal growth. Sure, there were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if it was worth the hassle. But every time I walk onto that deck, watch the sunset over the water, or hear kids laughing by the fire pit, I know it was. As for the future, I'm still figuring things out. There's always maintenance to do, improvements to consider, and new challenges to face. But I'm ready for them now. The cabin taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, responsibility, and compromise. More importantly, it reminded me why these things matter, not just for me, but for everyone who steps foot inside. So yeah, that's the story. Long road, lots of drama, but ultimately worth it. If you're reading this and dealing with your own family property issues, my advice is simple. Set clear rules, communicate openly, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the land, it's about what it represents. For me, the cabin represents home. And that's worth fighting for.